I have a slight problem with ICAO. If you are a future pilot or a student pilot at a flight school, when you hear Aviation English, chances are that the one thing that comes to your mind is ICAO, because you know that the stakes are pretty high. No ICAO means basically no job. So naturally, everything somehow starts revolving around passing that exam. Of course, if I simply tell you that Aviation English goes far beyond that, it wouldn't be rocket science, right? You already know that. But when your mind is so focused on that one thing, sometimes it can be very easy to lose sight of why you are doing it in the first place. So in this video, I just want us to take a step back and sort of remind ourselves of the difference between ICAO English and real cockpit English. And by the end of the video, you will see how remembering that difference makes the whole process easier for you, including preparing for and getting your ICAO Level 4. So, ICAO is actually a really interesting test. In my humble opinion, it is as close as a test can get to a real cockpit environment. It is not a test in its traditional form when you have a pen and a piece of paper and you are solving your multiple choice questions. It is an oral test and it has quite realistic tasks as well. However, it is not a perfect test because at the end of the day, it is still a test. And in a test, you don't get to experience those mistakes that can happen during real life communication. You don't get to experience those accents that you hear in real life operations. You don't get to experience this workload that you get as a pilot sitting in a real cockpit. And while you might have this exam pressure, you don't really get this operational pressure. Secondly, even though it is not a multiple choice test, you can still very much memorize some of the phrases, and just like you memorize them for the test, you can as easily forget them later on. Just think about your exams in high school or in university. You have that one exam, you study so hard for it a couple of days before, you come to the exam, you submit the perfect paper, and then a week later you forget everything. So this is the danger that not just ICAO but any given exam might have. And there's no way to go around that, unfortunately. But to be honest, we can just simply forget about all of that for now, because there's this one issue that I think is really important to remember. And this issue is that ICAO only tests radio telephony skills. And that might be a slight problem for us. So let's just try to remember, sort of all the layers that Aviation English has. Of course, the first thing that comes to our mind is ATC communication, which is radio telephony. But let's just try to remember where else a pilot uses English. Well, you might be working with a multinational crew. Your captain might be of different nationality, your FO might be of different nationality, the members of the cabin crew might be of different nationality. During international operations, pilots talk to ground personnel, to engineers, to maintenance. Then of course there are documents, NOTAMs, manuals, checklists, QRH, you name it. These are, for example, reading skills, which ICAO doesn't test. Then there's entering your flight plans into the FMC, which we can call a writing skill. And perhaps the other thing I would like us to think about is our professional development. At the end of the day, English is a global language. There are many pilot forums, there are many resources, there are many accident reports, which are only available in English. And so knowing English, knowing Aviation English, would actually be a great source for your development as a professional in your industry. So here's the core idea that we need to remember. Aviation English is not your ICAO Level 4, 5, 6 certificate. Just like your pilot skill is not your pilot license or your type rating. Just like your health isn't your medical. Your health is the things that you do, it's what you eat, it's the exercises that you do to get your medical. So just like your health, language is something that you need to maintain, that you need to work on. Luckily for us, language is not that hard to maintain because aviation English in itself is quite limited. Yes, you might have all of those different technical terms and words, but this is all quite limited. You get to use it almost every day in the cockpit while working. Look, I know that student pilots and cadets are always studying. You guys are always in your books, you are constantly being tested, there's ground school, there are test flights. So I'm not saying that you should quit all that and study English. All I'm saying is that when you are under high pressure, it is very easy to lose track of things. So it can be worth to slow down a bit sometimes and just remember the bigger picture. And that bigger picture for us is that ICAO is just a certificate, but language is an operational tool that you need as a professional. And once you remind yourself of that, you will no longer see ICAO as this barrier, as this thing that can cost you your career, but rather you will see it as just another check in your pilot journey. You don't even need perfect native speaker like English. All you need is to make sure that your English is good enough to do your job safely and without unnecessary stress, to understand others and to be understood by others. And I guarantee that if you just remember that bigger picture, ICAO will no longer be that thing that causes you stress. And those new words and phraseology that you learn and trying to memorize will no longer be something you are learning to pass the exam. It will be something that you are learning to do your job. And when you have that mindset while learning, it will be much harder for you to forget those words and phrases later on. In the next video, I'll show you exactly how you can study aviation English on your own. So if you're serious about becoming a pilot and don't want your English to be the thing that holds you back, you can watch that video next. I'm Maxim, and on this channel we focus on building real aviation English as well as studying strategies and ICAO preparation. So if you are interested, consider subscribing. And don't forget to like this video as well.